Ewan, one area of the white paper we've not discussed yet is that about defence and diplomacy, what's classed as obviously as hard power and soft power. What in your view would happen to an independent Scotland as far as the military is concerned, and the subsequent costs of that?
Well, although there have been defence cuts in the last 10 or 20 years in terms of the United Kingdom's forces, there are only two significant military powers in Europe, and they're the UK and France. And the UK still possesses a number of strategically very vital assets, particularly in terms of security services, special forces, and a number of overseas bases. I think we shouldn't underestimate the diplomatic network as well. The UK has embassies in almost every country in the world, and as a member of the United Nations Security Council, is one of 5 permanent powers. So the UK influence in terms of hard and soft power is highly significant. The Scottish Government have said there would be a Scottish Defence Force, and I'm sure there would be, but it isn't credible to believe it would be anything more than a very tokenistic peacekeeping force. They might look very nice in their Glengarrys and their kilts, but I think they'd have little more than bayonets.
While we've been touring Scotland, getting the views of people, we were in the Borders a couple of weeks ago, and somebody made a very good point that we hadn't necessarily thought of, and it talks about diplomacy again and about the UK having diplomats and embassies in every country. Somebody goes abroad from Scotland under an independent Scotland, gets into trouble abroad for whatever reason. What happens? Well,
you can have embassy sharing agreements, but my concern really is how does Scotland from scratch set up a network? Hugely expensive, buying the real estate for starters. Where do you get the people with the skill set to do that? You just cannot magic thousands of top diplomats overnight. And I think your point is well made. If someone does lose their wallet or is attacked or something like that, they require assistance. And I'm not sure that Scotland in any short order could provide anything like the degree of assistance that's on offer at the moment.
And how vulnerable would the country be to terrorism?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, terrorism's popped up in places you wouldn't have expected, in Madrid, in Bali, and in, dare I say, even Glasgow Airport. So I think the country is quite vulnerable, actually. The world has shifted since the certainties of the Cold War. We've moved to a very fluid and I think more dangerous and volatile situation, and Scotland simply cannot match the UK's security assets, so I think it would be a more dangerous place.
And in terms of military hardware, would we keep any of that? Would that just be, for instance, you know, if there is a yes vote on the 18th, are the RAF moving down south? Are we left defenceless?
Well, I think the split of the military assets would be open to negotiation, but it is highly unlikely that an independent Scotland could afford sophisticated fighter jets or warships. So I think the model probably would be akin to Southern Ireland, actually, which does have a standing army, but it's very lightly armed. So it becomes a peacekeeping force and maybe a border control force, but little more than that. And that's a very changed environment for Scotland, which has played a central role in global affairs, really, for the last 200 or 300 years.